I saw this huge plane it was. It looked much bigger than the first one. It looked like the one of those jets, you know, in the movies. One of those big jets. It was one of those, and it just hits. It hit the building right there.
Catherine Fletcher, English teacher. I noticed it enough to say to my class, "What was that?" sort of casually. I wasn't scared or alarmed. I just sort of said, what was that? And someone said, "Thunder." And I was like, "No, it's not thunder. It must have been a truck." It was like a sound of a truck, like hitting something on a street, or you know how sometimes you'll hear something like that.
Juan Carlos Lopez, school safety agent. I got this weird transmission, the strangest transmission in my life, that a plane hit the World Trade Center, and I ran into that computer room to see. I haven't gotten back into that office. The recollection of what I saw is framed in that window. Like, if I had to draw you a picture, I would have to draw the window frame as well. I'm a little apprehensive. Just looking at these banners, I get a little choked up. So I fear going into that office. I might lose my composure. But it's been long enough that maybe I could go into that office and take in. But you know, in a way, I don't feel ready. I don't.
Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from Professor Mark Rosenblum.
10 years ago, at about 8:15, I was gathered adjacent to the Rosenthal Library, and that bluff that's to the left of it, where there are some seats, concrete seats that give you a completely unobstructed view of lower Manhattan. The entire skyline is open for people to purvey. And my students were about to go into a class in the basement in Rosenthal that was going to start at 9 o'clock this particular morning. And I had 2 or 3 students that were with me early on, maybe 20, 25 minutes. It was our coffee clutch. It was the 3rd, I think, class of the beginning of the year. And Maha, this again I remind you is 2001. So the Mahas that are around today should not be misconstrued with this Maha. Maha was engaged in an intense discussion with Ezra, an Orthodox Jew, a Muslim woman, and they were debating the first assignment that was dealing with primary documents in the making of the modern Middle East following World War I. And they were having a dispute about a very famous or infamous document in which a British and French diplomats had come to at least a transitional agreement of how the 2 nations, with the assent of the Russians, were going to divide up the old Ottoman part of the Middle East into spheres of influence between them. This is the beginning of a story that historians often refer to as the thrice promised land, where at the end of World War I, different commitments were being made, completely contradictory commitments were being made to multiple parties. And I was really blown away by how prepared they were to cope with their primary source documents when there was this brutal interruption as we saw the first plane hit at 8:45. And it seemed like a matter of minutes, but it was actually 2 hours between we watched the first hit. The second hit, where the North and South Towers came down in a total of about 2 hours, maybe a minute or 2 less than 2 hours. So I had a chance to experience the collapse with a group of students that by now, by 11 o'clock when both towers had fallen, was probably 500-600 students. There wasn't yet a cell phone culture that was as pervasive as it is today. But several students did have cell phones, and they were hysterically trying to dial to reach their uncle, their father, their mother, their brother, somebody that they knew was supposed to be in that building today. And very few people could get through. There was a radio, a transistor radio that several people had trying to confirm what in the world was happening there. The college at that stage responded. The president, the then president of the college, this is a year and a half before Jim Meiskens and Sue Henderson became the chief administrators and executives of the campus. The college was going to be closed. The transportation system in Queens had collapsed, and students, many of them, were stuck on campus. And I was asked to find quick shelter to figure out which building was the largest and the safest that would accommodate for probably several days a number of thousands of students that were immobilized, unless they had a car, and the car was not going to take them very far, and the mess that very quickly emerged here in the borough of Queens. I was obviously stunned, and one of the small things I began to do with that class and with the next class that year is what the students identified as staccato-isms. That is, short bursts of sentiment and reflection and thought about what they had experienced in 9/11. I've chosen two of those staccato-isms, these short bursts of energy from students. One was a Muslim woman, veiled, who was quite energetic and active on campus. And the other was a young man who was about, little did he know at that stage, to serve a first tour of duty in Afghanistan as an intelligence officer. Both were extremely bright and articulate, and I asked them not to write poems that were lyrical and perfect. They had basically 8 minutes to come up with one of these staccatoisms. Here's the first one, and the word that she chose that came to mind as the centerpiece of her emotional makeup at this moment was loss, L-O-S-S. Loss as in gone, taken from this place, this earth. Loss as in having a father, mother, sibling who is surviving 9/11 but not thriving, cocooned emotionally, hurting so badly that evasion has become a way of life. Evasion of that day. My mother is in a lockdown mode. The taboo of talking about that day is a loss on top of a loss, which I can't bear alone. I fear. I live alone together with my family. Second comes from this young man who's about to go to Afghanistan. He actually lost a limb in that war as an intelligence officer. The word he chose was fear, F-E-I-R, and the parenthesis that he inserted. And the parenthesis was of them and me. Fear of them and me. Fear that is not finished. I know where I was when it happened, but I fear when and where I and you will be when it happens again. Fear of how that day will be framed and who will be blamed. Will I blame them? I fear them, and I am afraid of my own feelings about them. I yearn for a safe space to learn, to grieve and to goof, to cry, to hear and know each other, them and me.